Thanks for downloading a 3CR podcast. 3CR is an independent community radio station based in Melbourne, Australia. We need your financial support to keep going. Go to www.3cr.org.au for more information and to donate online. Now stay tuned for your 3CR podcast.
Welcome to another episode of Lost in Science. My name is Chris, and you may have seen some reports in the media recently saying that you need to do 5 times as much exercise as you thought you did. This has caused a bit of a stir in the media. You didn't see this one?
No, I didn't actually see that one.
No?
Maybe I just blanked it.
I don't know how much I'm meant to do, so I'm not really worried about it.
Right. Well, I've clearly got the wrong audience here. But you're both like incredibly healthy, so I'm not too concerned.
Thanks, Chris.
No, look, we're going to look at that. There was a report that came out that essentially said the recommendations for exercise are low to protect you against various diseases.
It seems like a big jump.
Yeah, it does seem like a big jump. So I'm going to look into that and where they got this new figure from and some of the criticism of this, but what it all actually means as well. I guess I'm getting a bit of a back to a bender of this sort of, lifestyle and medical research recommendations. But hey, it's always fun.
You're on a lifestyle and medical trial.
I'm on it for life, aren't I?
Yeah, you're.
Yeah.
We all are, really.
We all are. Anyway, so we'll find out about that in a moment. Stu, what do you got for us?
Well, speaking of health, I'm actually going to be talking about viruses. Not viruses that affect humans, but viruses need hosts in order to survive. So how do viruses not kill all of their hosts and then die out themselves?
That's a very good question.
It is. Yeah. There's some more recent research that has shown very specifically that some viruses can ensure that their hosts survive, and I'll explain how they do that.
Just like zombies?
No. Just actually something, a result of their infection.
Okay, Great. And we will have a story from Manisha. She's been telling us about the wildlife in the Ngorongoro Conservation Area, sort of crater area in Africa. So yes, all the creatures that make that kind of enclosed, lost world type system a home. On with the show. All right, for those of us who follow these things, like I said, there has been a bit of a stir recently over an article published by Australian scientists who did this research. It was published in the British Medical Journal, though, and essentially said that the recommendations from the World Health Organization for exercise, which are basically you need to do 150 minutes of moderate intensity exercise per week, they're saying that needs to be increased by about 5 times in order to protect against disease.
So the existing recommendation is about 30 minutes a day, is that?
Yeah, roughly. But it's 150 per week of moderate intensity, or 75 minutes of high intensity, if you want to do it that way. And as I'm getting sort of a bit of a vibe here, that people aren't really happy with this kind of notion that you need to do 5 times
It just seems, like I said, it seems like a huge jump.
Yeah.
How could they have gotten it so wrong? Which is like, we forgot to carry the 5.
Well, okay. Well, let's look at what they've done, because what they're trying to do is actually quite clever. Okay. So what they've done is they've done a systematic review. This is not just their own kind of original research. They've done a review of compiling all the existing research. They included 174 articles, and they looked at not just things like leisure activity, like where you go out and actually do some exercise, but all the physical activity that you might do, including domestic work, transportation, this kind of stuff. And this is, a lot of the studies normally in the past have focused just on the leisure time activity, recreational activity,
right? Okay.
And how much of that you need to do. But they're trying to uncover
the incidental activity.
Yeah, all physical activity, and they express it in what they call a metabolic equivalent, or MET, minutes per week, which then have to be translated back into actual exercise, because essentially, a minute of exercise is counts for about, I think a minute of moderate exercise counts for roughly about 4 minutes of metabolic equivalent. is why they seem to have worked on.
Right.
Yeah, so it gets complicated. Maybe I shouldn't talk about the metabolic equivalent minutes because it's going to get very complicated.
Is that metabolic equivalent? Is that just sitting there doing nothing? Is that the
Yeah,
equivalent?
I think it's your basic rate. So,
okay.
But this is good. This is a good approach because it captures, like I said, it captures all the incidental activities, all your work activities, that kind of stuff, and sort of conversely covers the effect of our sedentary lifestyle. Now, the other thing they did with this though is they tried to establish a dose response curve, trying to work out, instead of saying this much exercise, what will the benefit for you? Saying, what do all these studies show us about the increasing amount of exercise and what that will do for you? And try to do a graph of the benefit of exercise. And they looked at a range of diseases. They looked at breast cancer, colon cancer, diabetes, ischemic heart disease, and ischemic stroke. Ischemic is where it's kind of a clot forms and blocks off the blood supply. So the result they get actually is fairly unsurprising on the surface of it. So essentially what they got is that the more exercise you do, the better its effect is going to be. Mm-hmm. So, for instance, for diabetes, the recommended level from the World Health Organization, which is just 150 minutes of moderate intensity exercise, counts out to 600 MET minutes per week. That reduces your risk of diabetes by about 2%. But if you get up to 3,600 MET minutes per week, which I think is 6 times the amount, then it reduces it by an additional 19%.
Wow.
So that is a significant risk reduction. This is what they're getting at, saying, well, you can reduce it by 2% if you do what the World Health Organization does, but if you want to get a real benefit, then you need to do much more. So generally things like heart disease and stroke, you kind of had a benefit at lower levels, but yeah, for diabetes and for the cancers, you needed to do much more exercise to get much effect. So they recommend overall about 3,000 to 4,000 of these MET minutes per week, which I said is about 5 times the original. So 5 times 150 is 750 minutes of exercise per week. So yes, that's what they did and why they came to this conclusion. But yes, there has been a lot of criticism, not in the least being that this is kind of based on a whole bunch of other studies about people trying to report and estimate the amount of this non-leisure time activity, which is actually fairly difficult to do, or recall how much incidental activity you have done. So yeah, some of those estimates are unreliable, and some of the actual figures, when you look at them and look at the high extremes of these exercise levels they talk about, it equates to about 19 hours a day of activity, which is probably a little bit unrealistic for most people. There's some other weird things. Something I didn't see come up in the criticism, but I kind of noticed. I'm not saying I'm an expert at the statistics in these things, but you look at the look at
a little bit. You're saying that though.
No, I'm not actually not saying that. I'm not going to claim. I'm just saying it's me in my bald ignorance.
This is just something you've noticed.
I noticed when they got their little graph and they show on their graph all the different studies and the uncertainty, like the error bars from all the studies, and then a nice little dose response curve. The errors are huge. There's basically this big mass of all these errors, and they've drawn this nice smooth curve in between it. So I think they've done some very sophisticated statistical analysis, should we put it that way, to get a nice smooth dose response curve out of this messy data.
And did they address that at all?
No, they didn't. They just basically said we were very clever and we did a lot of work to get this a nice curve. But look, the main criticism has been the obvious one, as it does sound a bit unrealistic. So people have pointed out, for instance, that in Australia, about 56% of people meet this 150 minutes per week guideline. So the basic World Health Organization guidelines. Incidentally, the Australian government in the last couple of years has increased the recommendations. They've doubled that recommendation anyway. So the government recommendation is now like 300 minutes of exercise per week. So yeah, 30 minutes a day has already been increased, I'm afraid, Stu. But with this new amount, which is like 5 times that, fewer than 1% of people would meet this new paper's recommendations. So it's kind of going, well, really, is it a realistic thing? Can anyone actually achieve this? It's starting to get beyond the realms of what's possible. And that's certainly been the tone you've seen in some of the media reporting, as in essentially, you might think you'd be doing enough exercise. Well, it turns out that it's not going to protect you. You're all doomed anyway, and you've got this unachievable target, so let's all just give up and eat chips. That's what they actually said. But there's no surprise that then you get follow-up reports. Like there was a report in a newspaper the other day. I won't name the newspaper, it was the Herald Sun. And essentially, they were reporting that there was going to be a new study on the effect of a long-term endurance exercise on athletes, and basically the article was pitched at, is too much exercise bad for you? So trying to turn it around and suggest, maybe it's too much exercise bad for you, which is not the point at all anyway. So Yeah, it's been a bit of a backlash, and there is concern about what it does as a public health message. I think that is kind of a real concern there, but that's kind of a separate question as well. You need to really do a study of what the effect is on public health of having these conflicting things. It might be that if you aim the target higher, then people will aspire more. I don't know, but there's also, like I said, the original studies that it bases on, there's some shortcomings there. They said there need to be more objectively measured ones where people are carrying pedometers and that kind of stuff to really measure how much they're really moving. But maybe there's a lot of data available at the moment.
Some of those wearable exercise devices might be collecting useful data for exactly that kind of
that's the kind of
in
thing
the future anyway.
Yeah.
So there are some studies.
Or, Pokemon Go might just be...
that doesn't really measure your activity, Claire.
Increasing all of our activities.
Well, it can be, yeah.
Making us...
The trouble is with these kind of things, when you're studying stuff like cancers and heart disease and that kind of stuff, you need to do it over a long period of time. It takes a while to get... The technology is there now, but it takes a while to actually get the data out of that kind of thing. But look, I think on an individual level... As I said, the result is not really a surprise. It is telling you that more exercise is better. So I think it's also useful to consider the view that all activity is important, so not just your recreational leisure activity. So just be more active generally, do more housework and gardening, that kind of stuff.
Get off a train station or a tram
exactly.
stop before
Walking and cycling with transport. Climb the stairs.
Take the
stairs, that kind of stuff. And it'll make you feel good, so what have you got to lose anyway? I think that's the point that I'm trying to make in a roundabout way.
Science, the final frontier. These are the voyages of Lost in Science, our ongoing mission to explain strange new words, to seek out new science and new explanations, to boldly go where no radio has gone before.
So viruses are non-living things which share some characteristics of living organisms in that they contain sequences of DNA.
Is this a consensus that they're non-living? Is this what we've...
Well, they can't do... They have no metabolism.
Right, okay.
So they're basically just bits of DNA.
They're packs of genetic material.
Or RNA.
Or RNA, yes. But so unlike living organisms, viruses can't replicate DNA themselves and they require a host organism to do that for them.
Right.
And so what they do is they jump into their appropriate host, hijack the DNA replication mechanisms of the host in order to multiply and infect more host organisms.
So they get the cells of the host to make more viruses and then...
Yeah.
Yep.
And generally speaking, the host gets less healthy as a result of being infected by viruses. So this obviously presents something of a problem to a virus in that if it continues to weaken its host population, it may eventually find no suitable hosts to infect. If it's really successful at hijacking the mechanisms of DNA replication, then it could potentially weaken the host and kill it. And then where is the virus going to live?
Or not live because it's not alive.
Or not live because it's not alive. Yeah. Where's it going to
exist?
Dwell.
Dwell. Inhabit. Yeah.
So in plant populations, viruses are very common, and many economically important plant species are susceptible to virus infection. And in some recent work on viruses of the Solanaceae family, which...
nightshades!
Nightshades, correct.
Thank you.
Tomatoes and potatoes.
Thank you, Agriculture 101.
Studying viruses of the Solanaceae family, they've found an unusual side effect of virus infection in some of these species. So work published in August in the journal PLOS One has shown that in some cases, virus infection may actually enhance the survival of the infected plant species.
What?
So when plants are attacked by pests and diseases, the plants will emit volatile aromatic chemicals as a response.
Mm-hmm.
and these chemicals are also detectable by some insects. So,
Oh, as a luring, does that lure the insects to the plant?
yes,
Right.
yes. So what they found was that when they
As
infected
pollinators.
tomato plants with cucumber mosaic virus, they attracted a higher number of bumblebees to pollinate the flowers of the tomatoes.
Wow.
So the higher pollination rates mean greater numbers of seeds are formed, and the plant has more offspring and will proliferate, which means the virus continues to have a high number of available hosts to infect.
Interesting.
That's very interesting.
So the virus seems to induce higher levels of aromatics that are attractive to bumblebees. So plants that are susceptible to virus infection end up having more offspring as a result of being infected.
Wow.
So one thing that you find is that the genomes of many species, including humans, have got bits of DNA that came from viruses originally. Is it possible that one day that the tomatoes will just absorb the virus and...
Well, it's potentially if whatever's making this effect is absorbed into the genome of the tomato plants, then sure, it can just be a survival advantage for the tomato from then on. The release of these volatiles also attracts other insects, including aphids, which
that's not good.
That's not good.
by sucking sap from the stem of infected plants can then carry the virus to new host plants.
That's good for the virus, I guess.
It's good for the virus.
Yeah.
Good for the virus.
Good for the virus. So the virus gets spread around.
The virus doesn't care.
But also good for the plant in that it's maybe not that part, but when it's attracting pollinators, it's sort of like the plant's last ditch effort to sort of I'm infected by this virus. Now I'm going to attract pollinators, and I'm going to use all my available resources to try and
Produce as much seed as possible.
Much seed as possible.
Yeah.
Yeah.
They also found that there's a specific protein in the cucumber mosaic virus that was responsible for the change in the chemical release when the plants are infected. And this protein shuts down the natural defense of the host plant. So when viruses without this particular 2B protein were introduced to plants, they didn't...
Or it could be not 2B as well.
Well, some plants...
that is the question, really.
That is the question. But yeah, so without this 2B protein, viruses didn't produce the effect of producing these extra volatile chemicals.
Okay, right.
But in viruses where it is present, then it has the effect of producing them. So what the 2B protein actually does is binds onto the molecules that should be attacking the virus and chopping it up into little pieces. So this 2B protein blocks that and lets the virus replicate and continue and makes the plant produce more aromatics, and that brings the bumblebees and brings the aphids who carry the virus around. So it's all just a happy little ecosystem inside the tomato plant.
Nature is complicated.
That is complicated.
Yeah.
And from an agricultural perspective, that would be extremely frustrating for farmers who are trying to, and horticulturalists, right?
Well, the most productive plants might be the ones with the virus infected. It just goes to show, though, that there's no way of predicting what is going to be an advantage and what isn't going to be an advantage when you're looking at complex interactions in the wild.
Right. So when we get a cold, like a cold virus, is there possible good effects from that as well? You get to stay at home and watch TV, I guess.
Yeah, you get to stay home and watch Netflix.
Yeah. All around Australia on the Community Radio Network, you're listening to Lost in Science.
Okay, so today I'm going to be talking about the Ngorongoro crater. Ngorongoro.
The what?
The Ngorongoro crater. It's one of the 7 natural wonders of Africa.
Ah.
Yeah. Okay, so it's the Ngorongoro crater. Please say it with me.
Ngorongoro.
Yeah, it's so much fun, isn't it? Okay, so the crater is located in the Ngorongoro Conservation Area, which, of course, aptly named, which is right next to the Serengeti in northern Tanzania.
Okay.
And the Ngorongoro crater, is the world's largest inactive, intact, unfilled volcanic Caldera. Caldera, yes.
I don't know.
A caldera, anyways, is a cauldron-like volcanic crater, and it's formed when the empty magma chamber of a volcano collapses in on itself.
Okay.
So Ngorongoro was formed when the volcano exploded and then collapsed in on itself, and this happened almost 4 million years ago.
How big are we talking?
Yeah, okay, so it is 610 meters deep. The crater extends 19 kilometers across, and it spans nearly 260 square kilometers. So that's a pretty large crater, the largest crater. So this site is actually really important, and it's actually really interesting because it forms this really unique ecosystem because it's what we called a natural enclosure. So if you imagine, like the walls of the crater basically form a fence around this beautiful intact ecosystem.
So you often see this in movies where there's like kind of a lost world inside a volcano.
Yeah,
and
exactly.
Dinosaurs and things in there.
Yeah, exactly. And the big like ferns, and there's like a fresh, free-flowing river. Yeah, so that's the kind of feel that the Ngorongoro crater has.
But there aren't dinosaurs in there.
Oh, but there are. No, it's actually it's just home to, your average like black rhinoceros and Cape buffalo and like hippopotamus and wildebeest and zebras. So like this really, zebras. Sorry. But yeah, it's this really beautiful ecosystem.
And they're sort of protected by the volcano, are they?
So it's so the Ngorongoro actually has a kind of sad story. Oh. Okay, so it's 600 meters deep. It's some of the species like the wildebeest and the zebras, and they have antelope and things like that. They'll migrate with the wet and the dry season, so they'll come in and out of the system. But it's an enclosed. It's a natural enclosure. So some species, they don't leave, they don't migrate, other species don't, or other individuals don't come into the populations, and then we hit a massive side effect, and the Ngorongoro crater ecosystem is facing a massive inbreeding sort of situation, especially amongst the Maasai lions in the region.
Oh, okay. So the lions aren't migrating; they just hang around in there.
Yeah. So the lions. Okay. So these lions are they're also really particular. So the prides don't allow for a lot of migration and movement between, and because they've been in these in the crater ecosystem for so long, they've become incredibly inbred. Especially because of a couple events over their history that's led to like some severe bottlenecking. So basically, the entire population was almost dwindled down to just some individuals, and then there was a high level of inbreeding amongst those individuals to pull the population back up.
Because I imagine when you have this kind of enclosure like that, it's also very tempting for humans to go in there and hunt things to extinction and that kind of stuff.
So the Maasai lions are also really so because their populations are so low, when they are hunted, it has a very dramatic effect on the population's ability to survive. So there is a fair bit of that human interaction and that human role playing into it as well. But the big thing that's really killing this population is the inbreeding. So we all know that inbreeding can weaken a gene pool because the population has fewer variation or less variation in its genetic material. So it's less robust. So it can't fight against things like disease as well. And that's basically the big thing that's been that's driven this population or has reduced this population so much. The population has reduced down to about 62 individuals, and that was a number back in 2003. So it may be a bit different now. I couldn't find any newer numbers on the population, but
so that's not just one pride. There's a few prides in there, are there?
Yeah, it's supposed to be a few prides, but it's also the densest population of Maasai lions. So
a lot of competition, then, you'd think.
Yeah, so it's kind of I don't know. I don't really know how to There's a lot of funny things happening in the crater that are just a bit different from the rest of the lion populations in Tanzania. So the population was struck by deadly disease outbreaks between 1962 and 2002, and the first major population crash occurred in 1962, and the population dropped to just 12 individuals. So that's where one of the biggest bottlenecking events for this population occurred. And then it eventually recovered to about 100 individuals around 1975, but then it started to slowly decline again since then. And finally, then in 2001, 34% of the population died in just a few short months between January and April due to tick-borne diseases and canine distemper. So because of disease, they lost another 34% of the population. So now, currently, researchers are trying to devise a plan to introduce lions from outside prides into the populations to help promote the gene pool. But as I mentioned, the prides don't take on migrants very easily, so it may not be very successful. So there's a lot to work through for this population. But hopefully, sometime soon I'll be able to report on a happy, good news story about the Maasai lions. The other very important site on the Ngorongoro Conservation Area, it protects what is known as the Oldupe or the Olduve Gorge, which is considered to be the seat of humanity. Oh. This gorge was the discovery site for the earliest known specimen of the Homo habilis, which is thought to be the earliest Homo species. And it was also the site of the discovery of the earliest Hominidae, which is the family commonly known as the great apes, and it includes humans, orangutans, gorillas, chimpanzees, bonobos. So the great apes, the earliest great apes. And it's believed that some million years ago, the site, so the gorge, was actually a large lake, and that the crater was surrounded by a number of different populations. And so this was like this human, beautiful, green...
Garden of
Eden sort of esque thing.
Okay.
Yeah. So these specimens are actually, they're the oldest, as I mentioned, and they date all the way back to about 2 million, to nearly 2 million years ago.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, okay. Anyways, so the Ngorongoro Conservation Area, it's not only home to a very unique and interesting ecosystem, but it also is a paleoanthropological wonder of the world. So if you're thinking of your next holiday destination, maybe North Tanzania is a good place to go.
Ngorongoro.
Ngorongoro.
That is it for another episode of Lost in Science. Lost in Science is, of course, recorded at the studios of 3CR in Melbourne, and it airs across Australia on the Community Radio Network with the support of the Community Broadcasting Foundation. We would love you to get in touch with us. You can email us at lostinsci, that's LOSTINSCI @gmail.com, or you can find us on Twitter, or you can find us on Facebook. Just search for Lost in Science on 3CR, or you can listen to our podcast, or you can listen to us next week, once again, when Stuart, Claire, Manisha, and Chris will get Lost in Science!
Thanks for listening to a 3CR podcast. 3CR is an independent community radio station based in Melbourne, Australia. We need your financial support to keep going. Go to www.3cr.org.au for more information and to donate online.